Hello and welcome to the Wake Up Call podcast. Today I'm speaking with Dr. William Davis about his book, Undoctored, Why Healthcare Has Failed You and How You Can Become Smarter Than Your Doctor. Dr. Davis is a preventative cardiologist in Milwaukee and the author of the New York Times bestseller, Wheat Belly, Lose the Wheat, Lose the Weight, and Find Your Path Back to Health, along with its cookbook companion, Wheat Belly Cookbook. He is medical director and founder of both the Wheat Belly Lifestyle Institute and the Curiosity Program. You can follow his work and find recipes on his blog at wheatbellyblog.com and at the website for the book we'll be discussing today, undoctored.com. You can find him on Facebook under Wheat Belly and under Undoctored for this new book, and on Twitter at William Davis MD and at Undoctored as well for this new book. For more information, please see the show notes page for this episode at wakeupcallpodcast.com/undoctored. Dr. Davis, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's a privilege and an honor to have you with me. So this book is very comprehensive. I was amazed at how many topics are covered in this, how many different angles and you look at, and how many different aspects of health you look at. But I just want to start out with an overview of the book. So what is the theme here? What are some of the topics you cover? And what was your motivation for writing this book that really goes against conventional wisdom in so many ways?
What happened was I watched millions of people participate in this Wheat Belly process. That is the lifestyle that I advocated in the Wheat Belly series of books that precedes the Undoctored experience. And what I saw this, Adam, over and over again. People would say, I want to do your lifestyle, but my doctor says it's stupid and it's not going to work. It's against everything he believes. And you should just shut up and take your drugs. So your Lipitor and your acid reflux drugs, your antidepressant, etc. But these people would do it anyway. They would become grain-free and then take several additional steps, correcting, for instance, the deficiencies left in the wake of grain elimination, which are many, by the way, because grains cause deficiency. They don't fix deficiencies. And people would come back to me and say, you know what? I don't have diabetes anymore. I'm off insulin and my 2 diabetes drugs. My acid reflux was gone within the first week. The joint pain in my wrists and fingers is completely gone. My irritable bowel syndrome is gone. I don't have migraine headaches anymore. My ulcerative colitis is gone. I'm off the intravenous drug and the 2 oral drugs. I don't have joint pain anymore. I don't have skin rashes. But what caught my real attention here was not just the extravagant, wonderful effects that emerged from living this lifestyle, was that people were succeeding despite their doctors, despite the objections, despite the poor understanding of nutrition and health by doctors. So what I think I stumbled into was a collection of strategies, a simple collection of about 6 strategies that restore health across literally hundreds of health conditions that do not require the doctor, yet achieve levels of health and functioning that are superior to that achieved in conventional health settings. You can't even come close to achieving the level of health you can achieve on this lifestyle through a doctor. Because we live in this sad world where the medical system is bent on advancing its own cause to grow revenues. They just want more money. There are good people in healthcare too, but too many of the decision-making people, organizations, institutions are bent on growing their bottom line. And they've lost sight of the fact that this is about health. It's not about money and profit. So that's what I see my mission as, to advocate a path to health, because the truth of it is you and your listeners are able to achieve higher levels of health, slenderness, and functioning far superior to what you'd get from the doctor.
Yeah, and it is really remarkable to hear you say that and to hear some of the ways that the healthcare system has failed so many of us, as you just outlined there. And we'll get into more of those ways here in a little bit. And I think intuitively most people sense that there's something very wrong with the healthcare system, with the way healthcare is set up in the United States. And yet it just seems overwhelming and maybe like something that is out of reach to be able to do anything about it. But the subtitle of your book, and as you address throughout your book, is How You Can Become Smarter Than Your Doctor. So what are some of the things that are involved in becoming smarter than your doctor, and what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, the doctor's education, by the time he opens practice, is woefully out of touch. And that's not his fault. That's just the rapidity at which health information progresses now. So the pace at which new publications come out is unmanageable by one person. So no one expert, no matter how expert, has all the answers. So we live in this age where crowdsourced wisdom is becoming the message of the day. That is, when we all put our minds together. Now, sometimes it can occur to some degree through social media, but it's becoming more and more possible through websites and organizations like patientslikeme.com, for instance, that has 500,000 people all collaborating. These are not scientists or doctors. These are people like you and me, all collaborating to find better answers for, in this case, neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinsonism, dementia, and Lou Gehrig's disease. And you know what, Adam? The answers are starting slowly to come out. How about 23andMe and the genetic analyses companies? Better answers are coming out of that. So it's not coming from the doctor. It's coming from crowdsourced wisdom. The doctor and the healthcare system is too intent on developing their revenues. This is why we have $84,000 being charged for a drug for hepatitis C, 120 capsules that fits into one vial. If you go to the pharmacy, you're charged $84,000 for that one vial of drug. That's kind of emblematic of what healthcare has become, the raw predatory profiteering to squeeze you for your health insurance money for maximum gain for healthcare insiders. You know, Adam, healthcare in the U.S. consumes an unprecedented 17.5% of GDP, which is crippling the American economy. What we're not told is that behind closed doors, healthcare insiders want it to be 19%, 21%. They want more of your hard-earned money because that money goes into their pockets. So the people that make decisions, big pharma, the medical device industry, the hospital industry, and to a great degree, my colleagues, the physicians, want more of your money. They don't want less, they want more, and they will devise means to do so. They'll even go so far as to monetize health. They'll persuade you, for instance, in order to maintain cardiovascular health, you need a statin drug. In order to be happy and healthy, you need an antidepressant. In order to not have social anxiety in stressful settings, you need anti-anxiety medication. In order not to have heartburn, you need an H2 blocker or a PPI drug. They've persuaded you that to be healthy, you need to pay a lot of money into the healthcare system. This is, to me, like saying, Adam, if you want to maintain freedom of speech, I'm going to charge you and your family $10,000 a year, and you can say what you like. To me, that is so offensive, right? We assume that freedom of speech is a basic right for all of us. Health is likewise a basic right. It should be free or close to free. It should not involve excessive monetization via the powers that be, the healthcare insiders, who see healthcare as their means of achieving a huge wealth transfer, taking your money, the money of healthcare consumers, and putting it in their pocket. They're very successful at it. And I think we need to put a stop to it, because the truth of it is, you and I are capable of not just matching what can be achieved in healthcare, but dramatically exceeding it, getting results superior to what the healthcare system can achieve.
All right, yeah, so let's dig in a little bit here with what you and I can do and what we can do to be healthy and to avoid these ridiculous costs, these costs that, as you pointed out, are just spiraling out of control in the healthcare system. So what does the Undoctored approach cover, and what does it not cover? And what are some of the basic fundamental ideas behind the Undoctored approach?
You know, I grappled with this idea for a decade. And early on, what I tried to do was categorize everybody and say, all right, if you start with rheumatoid arthritis, you're going to start here with this program. If you start with type 2 diabetes, you're going to start over here. If you're obese and want to lose 155 pounds, you start over here. If you have joint pains, acid reflux, or migraine headaches, you start over here. I found that became rapidly unmanageable and very unsatisfying. So I drew from the lessons I learned in the wheat belly experience. And this is what I saw as the wheat belly experience evolved. I saw in the latter years of the wheat belly experience that people who engaged in 6 strategies, 6 basic strategies, these are wheat and grain elimination, restoration of omega-3 fatty acids via fish oil, iodine, and normalization of thyroid status, cultivation of bowel flora. Some very simple, 6 of them, strategies. What I saw was, regardless of what the label was, more often than not, far more often than not, you were freed of all those health conditions. The joint pain, swelling of rheumatoid arthritis disappeared. The diarrhea and abdominal pain of ulcerative colitis disappeared. Type 2 diabetics got off their insulin and oral drugs with blood sugars that were far better than on drugs. Acid reflux disappeared. Migraine headaches disappeared. Depression lifted. Suicidal thoughts stopped. And so what became clear was, in the vast majority of cases in chronic illness, it doesn't matter what the label was that was applied. Because if you engage in these simple strategies, 6 simple strategies, more often than not, they just go away. It might take a week, it might take 4 weeks, sometimes it takes 4 months, particularly autoimmune conditions, but in the vast majority of cases, they go away. If you're left, let's say you start with 4 different health conditions and 12 different drugs, which is very common. You do this for 3 months, you're down to maybe 1 health condition that's much reduced but still present and persistent, down to 1 drug. Only then do we have to talk about some of the additional steps that fall off that basic menu. But what I saw, Adam, was if we got people engaged in these basic strategies, basic, and by the way, very synergistic strategies. So you can't leave one out. You have to do them all. You do it, and astounding things to happen in weight, health, the way you look. I watch people every day turn the clock back 10 to 20 years in the way they look. They're not just thinner, they have much reduced inflammation, including in the face. And so you'll see people who do this, and you'll see observers on Facebook, for instance, say, that's a mother and daughter. And then the person and their friends will have to say, no, that really is her, because her appearance changed dramatically in the space of as little as 10 days, by the way. It can occur over a longer period, but many people change their facial appearance, inflammation, within a 10-day period. So we have the means to achieve extraordinary health. And virtually none of my colleagues talk about these kinds of things because there's no pot of gold at the end of it. So I see it as my mission and to help people like you broadcast these kinds of messages, because it's not coming from the medical system. And my colleagues, Adam, have failed us. They've failed us. They'd rather see you get a heart transplant than have heart health. So I say the enemy of the healthcare industry is not sickness, it's healthy people. Because if a guy like Adam is healthy, you are useless to the healthcare system. They need you to submit to their therapies so that you can be a source for revenues. And that is the perverse, predatory situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah, and let's look at one of the most important aspects of being healthy, and that's what you eat, what you consume. And obviously in Wheat Belly, you discuss this in great detail and really took on a lot of myths and a lot of the conventional wisdom surrounding wheat, surrounding grain, and the conclusions that you reached there, I know, were very different than the conclusions that most people reach or that most people just assume. But we're always shown this food guide pyramid. I guess maybe they've changed it, but where the federal government says that we should be having 6 to 11 servings of grains and X amount of dairy and so on and so forth. But what's really the truth about eating all this wheat, about eating all those grains, about eating dairy, and what are the types of foods that people should be eating as opposed to the types of foods that people actually eat today?
Many people are surprised, Adam, to hear that for the first 99.6% of human time on this planet, we did not consume grains. People say, oh, we've been eating grains forever. That's not true. We added it less than 0.5% of our time on Earth. We added it, by the way, in a moment of desperation when real foods fell in short supply. This was because of some changes in climate that occurred about 10,000 years ago. And that's where we begin to see a change in the landscape of human illness. We started to see a lot more skin diseases, bone diseases, reduction in height, iron deficiency. But it took until the 1980s when agribusiness got into the act and changed the grains on us. They made wheat, for instance. This was a topic of my very first book, the first Wheat Belly book. They converted wheat from a 4.5 or 5 foot tall traditional plant into a 1.5 foot tall, an 18-inch tall, what's called a high yield semi-dwarf strain with a very thick stalk, very large seed head, very genetically different from its natural predecessors. And that's where a lot of the trouble really got amplified. But I'm grateful for that because it brought attention to the fact that grains were always corrupt in the first place. The reason, I have to kind of whittle this down to its bare minimum, one of the main reasons why grains are so destructive to humans who try to consume them, first of all, they're seeds of grasses. And when you cut your lawn in the summertime, you don't save the clippings to throw on a salad, right? You know, when you think about it, it's green, it's a plant. Why can't you eat it like spinach and kale? And this is because humans cannot consume anything from the world of grasses, the family Poaceae. That's the biological name for the family of grasses. We can't eat the grass in your yard. We can't eat the blades. We can't eat the seed. We can't eat the seed. We can't eat any component of grasses. But humans figured out many years ago that if you dried the seed, isolated it from the rest of the plant, pulverized it, and heated it in water, that is, make a porridge, or bake it, as with breads, or brew it into beer, you could make it consumable. But despite that, you still cannot digest most of the proteins from seeds of grasses, just like you can't digest the blades, the leaves, the stalk, the roots, etc. And those proteins, because they're either indigestible or only partially digestible, because of that, become very harmful to you. See, if you eat an egg or a pork chop or other protein-containing foods, your body has the enzymatic tools to break it down to single amino acids. That's how we break down proteins. Not so with grains, seeds of grasses. You cannot break them down. And that's why the gliadin protein of wheat, rye, and barley, for instance, has now been identified as the cause for much, if not most, autoimmune diseases. This is why we know now the phytates of grains, also indigestible, are a major cause of iron deficiency anemia and magnesium deficiency. We also know that wheat germ agglutinin, not gluten, but agglutinin. It's called agglutinin because if it contacts your blood, it causes agglutination or clotting of the red blood cells. Wheat germ agglutinin is a very toxic bowel poison that actually causes a lot of the intestinal diseases humans suffer from. That's a partial list. So a lot of this has to do with a complete elimination of grains. If you start with that base, Adam, you've already started with an incredibly powerful tool for turning back literally hundreds of diseases. And by the way, this has nothing to do with celiac disease. That's a common misperception. And one thing people should never hear is be gluten-free, eat gluten-free foods. That's how the grain industry profits from this mistake, in addition to selling grains. So we go grain-free, and you have this incredible start. Now, the science that tells us we should replace white flour with healthy whole grains, you've heard all that, is a false premise. If you actually look at that data, you'll see how they used flawed logic. So, for instance, in the Nurses' Health Study, the Harvard study that demonstrates, or they purport to demonstrate, that whole grains make you thin. This is what they really showed. They took 47,000 nurses, and they quantified the amount of white flour versus whole grains and watched them for 12 years. What they observed was over that period of time, women who ate the most white flour products gained 10 pounds. The women who ate most healthy whole grains gained 9 pounds. Headlines read, "Whole grains make you thin." That's not what the study said. The study said white flour and whole grains both make you fat. Whole grains make you a little less fat. That's what that study said. If you re-examine all the literature, all the scientific evidence purported to show that healthy whole grains are good for you, you'll never find evidence for benefit. You'll always find evidence for less harm. So if something is less harmful, it doesn't mean it's better for you. So filtered low-tar cigarettes may be less harmful than unfiltered full-tar cigarettes. That doesn't mean that low-tar cigarettes are good for you. But that's the logic of nutrition. It's committed over and over and over again. So if we, and by the way, there's actually thousands of clinical studies showing to us that grains are very destructive components of diet. And so we don't have to start from scratch. These data already exist. And it's a simple experiment, right? Eliminate all grains, and you are relieved from many other health. Now, I should point out to your listeners, unless they're familiar with the wheat belly message, people who go grain-free experience 1 week of withdrawal or detoxification. And this is because the gliadin protein of wheat and related proteins in other grains form opiates or opioids in the bloodstream that cause addictive relationships with foods and amplify appetite by 400 to 800 calories per day. You take these out of the diet, you stop this flow of opiates, you go through a soft opiate withdrawal syndrome, nausea, headache, depression that lasts about a week. But once you're through that awful process, and it can be quite awful, you feel magnificent. You have this surge of energy, clarity, vigor. You can exercise, you feel wonderful, and you're free of appetite. So I got up this morning, I didn't eat till 1 o'clock in the afternoon because I didn't feel like it. And a lot of us forget to eat dinner. I've eaten lunch at 2 o'clock or so in the afternoon, gone about my work, watched TV, all those things, woke up the next morning, wondered, I'm a little hungry this morning. I wonder why. I forgot to eat dinner last night. So the experience of the grain-free person is a completely different perception of hunger, of food, even of taste. It even changes your sense of taste. And synthetic foods, particularly those with emulsifying agents or sweeteners or texturizing agents, taste awful. And you'll develop a new appreciation for Brussels sprouts and asparagus and simple meats and fats. And so it really changes your experience, your relationship with food. So the big first piece draws from the lessons I learned in the worldwide millions of people who participate in the wheat belly experience. And we start again in the Undoctored experience. Eliminate all seeds of grasses, that is grains.
Right, and while that may be the first step and a very important first step, of course there are many other aspects of diet, of nutrition that you take on in this book. And some of the things that you have to say about consuming dairy products, about salt, about calcium, about fat, about sweeteners, a wide variety of topics. The conclusions that you reach and the conclusions that are presented in Undoctored are different than, in many ways, than the conventional wisdom. So where are some of the other aspects of nutrition, of diet, besides just those aspects related to wheat and to grains, but where are some of the other areas where the general public tends to go wrong?
You know, the FDA back in 1924 urged salt manufacturers to add iodine to their salt. And the Morton's iodized salt label used to have a slogan, and it used to read, use more iodized salt, keep your family goiter-free. That was because back then, up till the 1920s, all throughout the world, about 20% of the population had these awful, disfiguring goiters or enlarged thyroid glands on their necks. So I bet you a lot of your listeners have seen those pictures in National Geographic and places like that. But that used to be your own neighborhood, particularly in inland areas like where I live in the Midwest, because all the iodine's in the ocean. And so this was a huge public health problem. As many as 70% of children in some areas had goiters and had iodine deficiency. So the FDA's solution to a public back then that didn't have the internet, TV, or radio, and many were illiterate and rural, was to put it in the salt and urge everyone to use lots of salt. And it worked. Goiters essentially disappeared. It led to overuse of salt with some adverse effects in some people. The FDA says more recently, in the last 20, 30 years, quit using all that salt. Many people thereby eliminated salt. Guess what's coming back? Iodine deficiency and goiters. But before you even have a goiter, you can have iodine deficiency for years, which only caused you to gain weight, blocks successful weight loss, makes you feel cold all the time, even when it's warm out, and increases cardiovascular risk substantially, including distortion of your cholesterol type values and blood pressure. The solution is just be aware of iodine and add it back through such inexpensive means as potassium iodide drops or kelp tablets, dried seaweed, and you solve the problem. You remove this impairment to health, this very, very exceptionally common impairment to health, iodine. Now, I'm going to bet you none or very rare people among your listeners got the advice to be sure you get iodine from their primary care doctor or other doctors, because my colleagues have forgotten. And iodine costs about $5 a year to replace, and nobody gets a pot of gold for it. There's no $10,000 procedure. There's no $150,000 heart bypass here. There's no $4,000 MRI. There's no $25,000 end of quarter bonus to the doctor who generates more revenues for his healthcare system. This is almost free, but it's too much trouble and too little reward for the doctor, so no one tells you. So I remind everybody, be sure you get your iodine. This was a huge public health problem for humans for many, many eons. And the answer is so darn simple. You also see things like this. The evidence to severely restrict salt, it's become clear, increases cardiovascular death. I'll say that again for your listeners. The advice to sharply curtail salt increased cardiovascular death. In other words, it's yet another example among many where conventional advice got it completely wrong. Did you know that the American Heart Association, one of the first products they endorsed nationally and for many years was Crisco?
Oh, wow.
Hydrogenated vegetable oil, which of course they asked the public to replace saturated fat with hydrogenated vegetable oil. We now know, of course, that was ridiculous. That was boneheaded advice because it actually made. There is no problem, first of all, with saturated fat. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But they took something benign and neutral, saturated fat, and replaced it with something very harmful, hydrogenated trans fatty acids. And that kind of misguided information that came from the American Heart Association has continued to today. And that's because industry, commercial interests, and agencies that advocate health are too cozy with each other. So if you can't turn to your doctor, you can't turn to the physician's assistant, you can't turn to the drug companies, you can't turn to the presumed advocates for health for answers. Who do you turn to? I say we turn to each other. In this age of information empowerment, social media, websites that collate wisdom, like patientslikeme.com and my website that'll be launched in May, finally, called Undoctored.com. Places where you get information, we share it with each other, we figure out what works. It's the empowering and incredibly useful method of crowdsourced wisdom. When you have one person, even an expert, they only know so much. When you have 10 people, you know more. When you have 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 people all collaborating to find answers, wonderful things happen, Adam. Wonderful things happen, and answers start to come to you.
Sure, and that's a topic I want to return to momentarily, but a couple more topics I want to get to first, and then we'll return to that and wrap up. But one topic that you cover towards the end of your book is sleep. Now, this is something that a lot of people, I guess maybe they take it for granted, myself included. I mean, there's many a night where I probably don't get a proper amount of sleep. But just what is the role of sleep in someone's health, and why is it so important?
Sleep is part of the natural circadian rhythm of humans. That is, so we've adapted to life on this planet, a planet with a 24-hour day-night cycle. And so we have internal processes that are in sync with that circadian rhythm. So we need to sleep. What happens if we defy the natural wisdom in our circadian rhythm? Well, weird stuff happens. If you cut back on sleep, just say to 5.5 hours a night, which is very common, many people do that, you die younger. You gain a lot of weight. You can gain as much as 22 pounds a year just from not getting enough sleep chronically. It distorts metabolic measures. Your HDL cholesterol is lower, your triglycerides are higher, your blood sugar is higher, your blood pressure is higher. You're more unhappy because you're always crabby. So sleep is crucial. I don't know of a good way to circumvent your need for sleep. You know, you and I live in this push, work world, and people very easily sacrifice on sleep, but it's a very destructive process to do that. So the only solution to this is to sleep until somebody comes up with a better way to ablate the need for sleep. everyone needs to sleep. And it's such an easy thing to accomplish if you can find the means to work that into your day. You really need to sleep. Now, what I try to do in the Undoctored books is to fold in a little bit more wisdom to make this workable. So we're often told that you need about 8 hours of sleep. That's nonsense. You need 7.5 or 9 hours of sleep. Sleep occurs in 90-minute packages. It takes that long to proceed through all the phases of sleep and then emerge at a time where it's much more conducive to wakefulness. That occurs at 7.5 hours or at 9 hours or in increments of 90 minutes. And so you can set your alarm to 7.5 hours, or you can buy there's a ton of new devices now that either go to apps on your smartphone or independent devices that monitor your sleep phases and will awaken you when your sleep has achieved a superficial level. So we've all had this experience where we were woken in the middle of a sleep phase by a loud noise, an alarm clock, whatever, and we're out of it. We're confused. We forget where we are, and that feeling persists through much of your day. So waking up at the wrong time in your sleep cycle can have an effect. So now we have these devices that help arouse us at the more appropriate time. So you're left with daytime clarity and feeling better. But sleep is crucial for so many reasons.
Sure. And what about exercise? A lot of people, it makes sense to them that some form of exercise would be a part of a healthy lifestyle. But what are some of the things that the Undoctored approach has to say about exercise, and where is the conventional wisdom wrong about the correct types and forms of exercise?
So people often think of exercise as a means of losing weight because of burning calories. That's nonsense. So you don't lose weight. First of all, exercise is a lousy way to lose weight. The only people who lose weight in exercise are the people who went from a sedentary lifestyle to vigorous exercise. There's an initial weight loss, but beyond that, it stops. So people who exercise or are physically active chronically, well, that's good for you. It does not achieve weight loss. So thinking of exercise as a means to burn calories is not true. The reason why exercise is helpful, there's a variety of reasons, but the big reasons are it restores the liver and muscle responsiveness to insulin. It makes you insulin responsive, and that's how you lose weight. So it means don't exercise like crazy for an hour. It means exercise with occasional bursts of high activity for 15 minutes, or incorporate some strength training. These are the efforts that restore sensitivity to insulin and help you achieve weight loss if you want to achieve weight loss. Another means by which exercise helps you be healthy is it increases brain volume, such as, and these data are very solid now, it increases the volume of the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the part of the brain, we have two of them, that converts near-term memory into long-term memory. And hippocampal shrinkage is what happens, by the way, in dementia. So exercise increases hippocampal volume and other volumes within the brain that you can see on MRI. In other words, exercise is wonderful, but not because it burns calories, but because of other beneficial physiologic effects. So what I tell people is don't exercise for an hour, 90 minutes, and make yourself crazy and subject yourself to that kind of tedious activity. Do things for fun. Dance, go to Zumba, garden, bike outside and feel the breeze in your hair. Do fun things. If you want to cut back on the 25, 30 minutes that it takes to get these benefits, incorporate brief bursts of intense effort. So if you're walking, for instance, walk at a moderate clip, and then for 40 seconds, walk really fast up a hill. That's it. Or when you bike, incorporate a real rapid, hard burst every 3 minutes or so. And that abbreviates your need for exercise with the same benefits as longer duration exercise, and incorporate strength training. So it's really very easy, but people have to get rid of this idea that exercise is about burning calories.
Sure. Now, two more topics I want to get to very quickly before we draw some final conclusions. And these are both things that are associated, I guess you could say, with the pharmacy, but vitamins and then prescription drugs. Now, you've mentioned some of the issues with prescription drugs, and it seems like Americans are being prescribed more and more prescription drugs every single day. It's just staggering, whereas the role of vitamins in a healthy lifestyle maybe is being neglected. So vitamins versus prescription prescription drugs. What are your thoughts on there, and where does the undoctored approach come down on the benefits or the issues with using either one of those?
I agree. It's staggering what's going on in the world of pharmaceuticals, that we're all being told that all of us need many pharmaceutical agents to maintain health, which of course is absolute nonsense. And this is the first time in human history that we've been told this. And now, what if we compared the health of modern people to the health of people who, and there's very, very few of these people left because we've encroached on their living space. People like the Hadza in Tanzania or the Matsas in the highlands of Peru. These are people who live outdoors, hunt, fish, and gather their food. They live the life that humans lived for the first 99+% of our time on Earth. They have no diabetes. They have no autoimmune disease. They have no dementia, no depression, no schizophrenia, no skin rashes, no acne, no dandruff. Now, they have injury and infection. So they have dengue fever and malaria, and they have gashes in their legs from animal attacks and falling off rocks. They have injury and infection, but they have none of the so-called diseases of civilization that we have. In there, I think, is a very important lesson. What if we were to mimic as best as possible some of the diet and behavior of those people? We will be largely freed of the so-called diseases of civilization. Yeah, you still might get an infection if you travel to Costa Rica, but you won't have diabetes or heart disease or dementia or many cancers. We'll mimic behavior, the health of people who live their primitive lives. But the healthcare industry does not profit from it. As I've mentioned before, the enemy of healthcare is not sickness, it's healthy people. So if we're healthy, we don't need those drugs. Now, supplements are another. I love nutritional supplements, but I also love truth even more. And the truth of nutritional supplements is that the vast majority are simply not necessary. I classify nutritional supplements, Adam, into two different worlds. One are supplements that address intrinsic human need, things that you need because through human adaptation, we developed a need. This would be like vitamin D. So your predecessors ran outside, naked or semi-naked, in a tropical or subtropical climate and ate liver and other organs. That's how we got vitamin D. Well, we don't do those things, right? Or you work indoors, you wear clothes, etc. So we have this need for vitamin D. But the vitamin D you take addresses an intrinsic human need established by many millions of years of human adaptation, as opposed to nutritional supplements that do not address an intrinsic human need. So I can't tell you, for instance, that ashwagandha addresses an intrinsic human need. It doesn't mean it can't have some modest benefits, but what you find is the supplements that address intrinsic human need provide huge benefits. The ones that don't address intrinsic human need, at best, provide modest or no benefits. And so I focus on the ones that address your needs, and you get these incredibly large effects. And another interesting thing happens. When you use these nutrients that address intrinsic human need, and you do it together, you get this, what I call 2 + 2 = 11 effect. You get this unexpected, synergistic, large effect by doing all these things. And so that's how I address supplements. It's inexpensive, it's safe, and yields effects far more than you expect.
All right, so what are some easy steps that someone can take right away to start with the undoctored approach? And what are the ways that modern technology can help someone be healthy? Because as you've mentioned, there are all sorts of apps, all sorts of information available on the web that make it easier for someone to start on the path back to health. So what are some very quick and easy ways to get started with this?
First, no longer view your doctor as an expert in health. He or she is not an expert in health. They're an expert in navigating the healthcare system and maximizing revenues for the healthcare system. Their interaction with the doctor is not about health. Because if interacting with your doctor had something to do with health, they would ask you detailed questions about your diet, your sleep, what your use of salt is, whether you're obtaining iodine from elsewhere. How is your vitamin D perfect? Is your thyroid status perfect? They talk to you about exposures to industrial chemicals and genetically modified foods. But I'm going to bet you most of your listeners have never had these conversations with their doctor. Instead, the doctor just wants to be sure whether you need a statin drug for your cholesterol, blood pressure drugs for your blood pressure, whether you're due for a mammogram or a colonoscopy. In other words, they're bent on obtaining revenue-producing activities or delivering products. So forget the idea that your doctor is your friend and there to help you advocate for health. He or she is not. They're a resource when you need them. If you have an infection or you have an unanswered question after you've done all the right things, or you're injured, the doctor is a place to go. But don't go to the doctor for health because they're idiots when it comes to health. They do not understand health. That's not their job. Your job is health. It's the job of the individual to take over control of health with some benign guidance. So that's the first order of business. Recognize that you have incredible power over your own health and that the doctor will not do that for you. 2, attention to diet. Diet is crucial, but ironically, the diet advocated by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the USDA, the American Heart Association, the American Diabetic Association, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, causes disease. It causes your blood sugar to go up, causes weight gain, causes dependence on medication, and derives a great deal of revenues for those organizations. So we reject those messages and those organizations, and we instead turn to sources of truth and conversation and shared experience. And that's what I'm trying to cultivate. Recognize that this is a very powerful movement, and it comes at a good time because healthcare has achieved a bubble status. It's too big, it's too costly, and we're now facing even worse costs. You know, Adam, we're told that American healthcare consumes 17.5% of GDP, but healthcare insiders want it to grow to 19, 20, 21%. They want more of your hard-earned money. And that's not, and buried in there is not health. It's better healthcare, better health for the healthcare industry. So we live at a time where the information has exploded and the tools for achieving health are available. We just have to make sense out of it all. And that's what I'm trying to do with Undoctored, trying to make sense out of it all. And if you embrace these handful of strategies, more often than not, you will be shocked at what happens to your health and your appearance and the way you feel.
So what are some resources or some websites that you would recommend someone take a look at if they want to learn more about health and about correcting any issues with their health? And then what are the best ways to follow your work in particular?
Well, I'll toot my own horn here only because I think it's the easiest way to do it, and that is my undoctored.com website, which I've been working on for over a year. We'll launch about the same time the Undoctored book comes out, which is May 2017. And that will be a site for people to discuss, share, and we'll also collect your data, if you allow us. It's one of my great regrets in the wheat belly experience. I did not collect data around the world, and I wish I had. So if I had that data now, and I could say something like this, Adam, we have data on 78,000 people, and they lost an average of 23.7 pounds in the first 6 months. They reduced the reliance on medication from 6.7 medications per day down to 1.3 or whatever. If we had that data, now we have formal arguments, data that we can show to the health insurance industry, hospitals, U.S. government, and other agencies so that we can affect real change. So I don't have that now. We just have anecdote on a global level, but we're going to collect that data with the undoctored.com experience. And we should have that, of course, collated and analyzed within several months after launch. So that remains a primary resource when it launches. There are many other sites. There's patientslikeme.com about neurodegenerative disease. There's Cure Together, which also collects data on numerous experiences. They're not very helpful at helping you get rid of conditions. They help you kind of track it and track your experience. Then there are many sites that advocate specific strategies for achieving better health. One of my favorites is one called Stop the Thyroid Madness, which was set up by just a woman who was very frustrated with all the doctors who gave her bad information on how to correct thyroid status, which, by the way, is rampant. And that's because the revenue-generating solution for thyroid dysfunction was a branded form of levothyroxine, the T4 thyroid hormone. But that's not how you achieve ideal thyroid status. You have to take on some new ideas to do that. And the woman who started Stop the Thyroid Madness has done a very, very responsible, credible job of showing readers how to do it on your own, with the doctor only as this person on the side to help you get, for instance, the right kind of prescriptions if you need them. So there's a lot of these kinds of emerging resources. They're changing all the time. So part of this conversation is I'm going to do my best to try to keep abreast of these and let people know as they follow the Undoctored conversation, new place to turn to for emerging wisdom on maintaining your health, reachieving health without the doctor, without the healthcare system, without being bled dry for your healthcare money.
All right. Well, I want to remind everybody that the show notes page for this episode is wakeupcallpodcast.com/undoctored. And of course, there will be links there to purchase the book we've been discussing today, which again is Undoctored: Why Healthcare Has Failed You and How You Can Become Smarter Than Your Doctor. And of course, we barely scratched the surface. There's just so much in this book. There's stuff about safe toiletries and cosmetics, about bowel-related issues and constipation, about how different types of alcohol can affect your health. There's just a wide variety of topics. There are recipes. There's even a recipe on healthy peanut butter cup cookies. So right there, if that doesn't sell anyone, the idea of having healthy peanut butter cup cookies. So again, the book is Undoctored, and the place to go to find it and to find all the resources related to this episode and mentioned over the course of this episode is wakeupcallpodcast.com/undoctored. And I want to encourage everybody to subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes and on Stitcher. And Dr. Davis, thank you so much for being so generous with your time today and for joining me to discuss your very exciting new book that I hope everyone will read, and to look at a wide variety of myths and problems with health, with the American healthcare system, and some ways that the individual can take it upon themselves to fix at least health as relates to their own health, and to take care of themselves, even if the system won't. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Adam. Keep up your terrific work.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wake Up Call podcast.
If you would like to listen to more episodes, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes, or subscribe on Stitcher, and check out our website at wakeupcallpodcast.com.
There you will find show notes pages and comment sections dedicated to the show. You can also email us at contact@wakeupcallpodcast.com if you're interested in being interviewed for the show or have any other suggestions.
Thank you.